Welcome to day 2, everyone, of the 6th Invitational. I am Craig Robinson, community developer on Rainbow Six Siege, and we are really excited. We're about to talk, I'm joined by a few members of the development team, and we are about to talk about operator balancing, game balancing. I'm joined by JB, one of our game designers, Geoffroy, a data scientist, and Julian, a member of our user research team. JB, what does a game designer do on Rainbow Six?
So typically, and especially in this context, I work with people like Julien and Geoffroy who give me lots of data and information on things that are going on in the game, and I try to find solutions that fit with the global gameplay direction of the project. Okay, thank you.
Geoffroy, what does a data scientist do, and why is that important?
So what we do, we have two parts. We have the data part. So let's say when Julien comes and say, well, I lost 10 rounds with Blackbeard yesterday, we should definitely buff him. I'd be the one saying to him, well, you're just statistically bad. You know, this kind of stuff. But no, the idea is that we want to get data that represents what's really happening in the game rather than just basing it on our personal information. And then as a scientist, what I try to do is make sure that these people use the data appropriately so that they just don't look at one single data point and be like, well, we should do that. No, we need more context and everything.
Okay, great. And user researcher, what is that? What can you tell us about that, Julian?
Well, the idea is to complete the insight we get from data with insight, from the community, from what we see when we invite players of all levels. So we qualify the problem we can see in a game and try to get some insights directly with a direct feedback from our players.
So you kind of take a qualitative approach to user feedback, and you're more of a quantitative approach. Is that about right?
Yes, exactly.
All right, great. And all three of you work together. What can you tell us about how you guys work together, JP?
So the idea is that in the past 2 years, we've already been doing lots of balancing stuff, like everyone knows. Everyone was doing it when they had time. We've recently identified some issues with doing that. Sometimes we lacked reactivities. There were some big issues that stayed there for too long.
And by everyone, you mean the team of game designers?
Yes, all the game designers, okay. Julien and Geoffroy were already helping with that. But the project decided to give us a more specific mandate, the three of us, to really focus more of our time specifically on the balancing issues. So we formed sort of a balancing team, you could say. And yeah, the idea is that we're really going to try to spend more time focusing specifically on that.
Okay, so we've always been working on balancing as the team of game designers and data scientists and user research, but now we have an actual predefined team of the three of you that's really focusing on that to increase reactivity and reactionary ability to adjust operators. All right, great. So what can you tell us about like how in the past, we've been balancing operators and your team of game designers have been working together on that, and how that's going to be changing in the future?
So there's a few things that we hope are going to change, and that we know are going to change. The first one is we're hoping to gain reactivity and to gain focus. And one of the things we need to do that better is to try to focus more the release of content in the same bits inside the seasons. So a typical example with that is we're going to keep on doing operators rework because we need to keep on doing them. Lots of them need to be changed and to evaluate in stronger ways than just little data changes.
So an operator rework, you mean like a cap can change or something like that?
Okay, yes, great. For instance. And that kind of change is still going on, but it's still it's going to be packaged inside of the seasons and not in the middle of the season patches. The main reason for that is that it allows us to be have a clear focus on shipping new content in terms of production, debugging, and doing all of this inside the seasons. And then during the seasons, we will still have a big balancing patch in the middle of the seasons, but it will be only focused on little data changes that we think are necessary to get to a progressively more and more balanced meta through inside a single season.
Okay, so we have the big changes are coming at the beginning of a season.
Yes.
Minor tweaks and adjustments are coming in the middle of the season to make sure we're maintaining the stability of that meta.
Exactly.
All right, fantastic.
And there's another change I think which is going to matter, which is we're going to try to communicate more on what we're doing. We're going to try to give more information on the future balancing patches that are coming, but also give more information on the effect of the previous patches that we did, and did it achieve what we tried to do, or did it fail, and so do we need to do something else?
So increased communication is also going to be one of the things that all four of us are going to be working together on the future.
Absolutely.
For like changes and stuff we made and the impact on our players that we're seeing.
Indeed.
All right, great. I think all of our players are going to be really excited about seeing that one. So Julian, real quick, as a user researcher specialist, really, how does that work, and what is the importance of that?
Well, the way we work to balance our game and the operator more specifically is even before an operator is released, we start getting feedback on it. Of course, we play it a lot internally, and we invite pro players from around the world to really try and break the stuff we are making, making sure that we don't release operators that have glaring issues, and really catch that stuff early on. And this is an iterative process, so it goes on and on and on, until the point where an operator is released and players around the world can start playing him. And we keep doing that. So we keep getting feedback from the community, know that they can play it, and we keep working with pro players, players of all levels that we invite directly in our studios to get their direct feedback, and so they can talk to us about the issues they have with the way the game is played.
So ensuring that we have feedback ahead of time and we can kind of catch some red flags before they go live is really integral to what you do and what you bring to this overall balancing team. Fantastic. And Geoffroy, we don't only rely on player feedback. What can you tell us about the numbers and the data side of it?
So, like you said, so we need to do some tuning before it goes live. But once it's live, we have a lot of information because millions of players are playing the game daily. So we have so many information. And the idea is that we are mostly focusing at first to finding glaring issues. So the two metrics that we are looking in the first place, not the only ones, but just to have a view of what's happening, are obviously peak rate and win rate. So the idea is that the peak rate shows whether you're underplayed or overplayed, like you're overpicked. And the win rate, what we do is that we are looking at what we call a win rate delta, so the variation of win rate for your team depending on whether the operator is or is not on that team. Meaning that if a win rate data is of 5%, then it means that just by playing this character, you gain 5 points in terms of win ratio.
So you take all the data from win rate, just to name a couple, win rate, pick rate, things like that, and you throw it all on a balancing matrix.
Exactly.
Yeah, what can you tell us about that?
So what we do is that we just plot these the different operators on this matrix, on this graph. So to just see, well, do we have operators that are way too picked or way too strong? Like, do we have overpicked and overpowered operators? Because like playing against something that is overpowered is obviously not fun. So we want to fix these kind of things. And as well, so we have different areas, and the same way if something is not strong enough and people don't play it, when there is something we should do about it.
Absolutely. And as a regular player who's admittedly not particularly good at the game, I would think that balanced would be right in the middle.
Yes.
Right. Well, I've noticed that the sweet spot is not in the middle. Why is it off center like that?
So it's mostly off center in terms of pick rate, because as you can see in terms of win rate, we want the operators to be fair. We want that. We don't want to have a win rate delta of, let's say, 5%. That's huge. So we want you to have lots of different viable options to choose from. And the idea is that in terms of pick rate, if we want all the operators to be picked equally, then you cannot see all the operators 50% of the time, because we have like way too many operators. We have like 18 attackers at the moment. So the average win rate of operators, given that information, would be about 27 to 30%.
Okay.
So we want them to be in that area.
So we're looking at really the win rate, and we have some operators that are maybe skewing the graph a bit.
Yeah. So we don't want to have them all within that circle, but we want them to be as close as we can get. Like the further away you are, the more alarming it is, and the more we are going to investigate with more data.
Okay, so let's take a look at a few of those operators. On this graph, we are going to have Castle, Thermite, Sledge, Habana, and Ella. I know that Ella being on there in the top right corner is probably a surprise to everyone here and everyone at home watching. It caught me off guard, admittedly. But JB, let's talk about Ella.
Let's talk about Ella. So Ella, as you can see, is the further away from the sweet spot that Geoffroy was describing, was showing us. She's by far the biggest balancing issue we've ever had in Siege since release, by far.
Even more than Blackbeard?
Yes,
Okay.
Blackbeard included. It's really, really, really bad. So obviously when we have something like that, it's something we need to react to, and I won't hide that she's a big part of the reason why we decided to focus more of our attention on balancing, because having that big of an issue for so long in the game is something that shouldn't happen, because it's a pain for every player to see her being picked all these rounds and getting wrecked by an operator that is so overpowered. So I think the first thing that we can look at, just to illustrate how much of a problem she's been, is the pick rate of Ella and the evolution of that pick rate since she has been released. If we look at the chart of her pick rate, something that is really, really striking is that this pick rate has not evolved since she released. And that's something that we generally do not observe. The pick rate that you can see on the left part, 16%, has to actually be multiplied by 5 because you have 5 spots on the defender's side.
So it's pretty high.
It's actually 80%, meaning that in 80% of the rounds, she's there, which is really, really crazy. We've never seen that in the history of Siege.
Clearly.
And the second aspect of it, which is really crazy when you look at that, is that when you look at the release of the Season 4 season, so December 5th, with the release of Vigil, her pick rate was not impacted whatsoever. And this is something we have never seen, ever, ever. In the history of Siege, every time, even when an operator was really strong, a new operator would always impact the pick rate of that operator. And here, no impact whatsoever. So something needs to happen.
So thus the balancing team was formed. What do we have? So your team's been working diligently on Ella. What do we have? What can we take a look at how we've managed Ella in the past and what we're doing in the future?
So, quick reminder, we've already done 3 nerfs to Ella. That were clearly not enough, but we already nerfed her 3 times. The first nerf came in 3.2. It was a small recoil nerf. And then in 4.2, she lost 10 bullets in her magazine, and the concussion effects were nerfed slightly. To be honest with you, this 4.2 update, when we looked at the data about a week after it was released, we were really disappointed to see that it has, we were expecting a small impact, but it has pretty much no impact. Okay. So she clearly needs additional nerfs.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some additional nerfs. I think your team has some things planned for her coming up. Let's
definitely,
talk about that.
definitely. So for Season 1, there are 3 additional ways that we're going to try to get her more in line with where she should be, closer to that sweet spot. The first one is we're going to increase the recoil a lot to make sure that she remains really strong at close encounters, but cannot be at such an advantage against attackers that have a long range or medium range against her. So the kick is going to be much stronger than it is right now. The second aspect of it is the damage of the gun is going to be lowered, because when you look at the rate of fire of that gun compared to other guns that have high rate of fire like the Vector, it's pretty clear that it shouldn't have that high of a damage. It has way too much DPS. And then the third aspect of it is we're going to get rid of the impact grenades on her and replace it with a deployable shield, so that she has to rely a lot more on the rest of her team to prepare her roaming strategy, and so that she cannot just do the whole roaming work all by herself.
Fantastic. So it sounds like Ella mains may be a little upset about these changes, but everyone else can agree that they're pretty necessary. All right, fantastic. And we've got a few other operators that are really interesting from a data perspective. We have Sledge, Thermite, and Hibana. Geoffroy, let's talk about Hibana.
Yeah, Hibana is a good example of the kind of things we want to do in the future, which is like smaller changes, so things that are not like huge issues in the game. But as you look at the data, you can see that what's specific about Hibana is that she's a hard breacher, and we only have 2 of those in the game. And when you compare her to Thermite, which is pretty fine at the moment, she's stronger, she's more big, she's more useful. And the problem is that after investigating why she was picked more, we saw that she was way better than Thermite at killing people. So why this is fine? I mean, she's a 3-speed, so you would expect her to be efficient, but this was an issue in terms of power balancing. So we took some feedback from the community, from the pro players through.
Okay, great.
And so usually this is what we do. We spot a problem, then we get some feedback to investigate further. And so what we did, we looked at a secondary weapon, because according to people, it was kind of a stronger secondary weapon. So what we did is that we compared the percentage of kills made with a secondary weapon of Hibana, so the Bearing 9, as opposed to Sledges, so the SMG-11.
Even without the ACOG, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And as a smoke man, this is very offensive. Just remind me of that. Yeah, so this is what we did. We looked compared to someone else who was fine, like the SMG11. I think we can all agree that this is a good weapon. And so we saw that she made twice as many kills with her secondary than sledges. And when you go to high levels of play, like diamond players, you see that almost a third of the kills made by Ibana are made with a Bearing 9, which is huge. So we are going to do a small nerf to that gun in one of the next patches, probably coming like 1.2.
Okay.
And so we want her to be more in line with other operators in that situation. So she should be good compared to Thermite, but not overwhelmingly strong with two good guns.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, Julian, how does your team kind of factor in helping Geoffroy narrow down where to look for these operator imbalances?
Well, for sure, we'll look at what the community is saying with your help, and then we try to figure out what the matter is when people talk about an operator, like complain about Ella or sometimes Ibana. And we do like, narrowing down item by item, element of the operator by element of the operator to see where the problem lies. And we confirm that with the data we get from Geoffroy.
Right, so it's really important for you guys working together because you're pulling massive amounts of data.
Yes.
And the user research team helps you narrow down where
very
to look.
valuable. Yeah.
Excellent. Now, Geoffroy, real quick, your team. I've noticed in all these graphs, your team is pulling the data from high skill levels. Why is that so important?
Yeah, so as you may have seen, all the graphs since the beginning of this panel have been about Platinum, Diamond players in ranked. And so there are multiple reasons for that. The first one being that the games played in ranked are more serious, they're more competitive, like people are actually trying to win, trying to find the best strategies they could get. So this is usually where we have a more stable metagame. And then we also are looking at high levels of play because we saw that these players are more focused. So like I said, more strategic. And also what we saw is that usually the metagame that you see at higher levels of play tend to go to lower levels through time. So basically what's happening today in Diamond would someday make its way to gold players.
So you're really looking at this high skill level bracket because of the stability of the meta there.
Yes.
And it kind of lets you nip some issues in the bud before it impacts the majority of our
exactly. And usually when we do, so like you saw on the Ibana graph, we're also trying to look at the data for all levels of play to make sure that we are not breaking the game for other players when we are doing these fine.
So making these fine-tuning tweaks is really important for high level, but also ensuring that this lower skill level players aren't having a rough time.
Yeah, and it's a tricky task because it's not the same game you're playing when you're playing in bronze or in diamond or even in the polling. I mean,
absolutely, and it's interesting you bring that up because the next operator we're going to talk about is Castle.
Yes.
So, Julian, what can you tell me about Castle and why he's kind of an outlier?
So if you look at the matrix we have there, he's pretty much the opposite of Ella. He's one of our least popular operator, only more popular than Tachanka, and I'd say something. And he's also not very strong in terms of win ratio. So this is definitely an operator we want to work on because it's typically the case of buff we want to push. And it's also an interesting case because we've seen it being played in Pro League. Like for the past few days, we've seen very good Castle play. But if we look at what our community is experiencing, what most players are experiencing, they have trouble making it work. So even if we work with pro players and the DSL and the high level of competition, we also look at what all our players are experiencing. And the fact is, Castle is hard to play. It's hard to leverage. It can even be detrimental to your team if you don't play it right. So we're going to investigate a bunch of things to make him work better. And we already checked a few ideas.
So real quick, you've noticed that even at pro level play on a really organized team on some maps, some bomb locations, Castle can be integral to a defense. But at the majority of matchmaking, at especially lower level play, it's more of an issue and can even be a hindrance to the teams that select him.
Yes, and we want to make all the operators viable ultimately. So we want to bring everyone closer to that sweet spot we showcased. So we want to make Castle an interesting pick for everyone.
Makes sense. Now, You mentioned that your team's been working on some things. Can you tell us maybe some of the ideas that you've all had to potentially bring Castle into a more streamlined meta?
Yeah, we tried a few things already. We tried to remove the amount of gadgets that can break the castle gadget, but it was not enough. And we're also looking into ways to make the barricades less harmful for your team if they are not placed correctly. But we're still working on it, and you can expect more information on that at a later point in the future.
All right, fantastic. So we have the balancing team that's taking a real hard look at a slew of operators from the most OP, Ella, to some of the not quite so strong operators like Castle and maybe Tachanka. Maybe Tachanka. But JB, can you tell us kind of what the balancing team means to you as a game designer and the future of Rainbow Six?
So it means a lot because we definitely feel like this game is all about metagame. We're still working on improving what we're doing. To be honest with you, like when we tried to push the Ela changes for Season 1, we saw that we had almost no time to push these changes in time because the build was already closing. So we still have a lot of work in terms of getting there for the pipeline and making things work. But I definitely feel like we should improve this year, and you can expect a lot of information on the R6 blog and on various ways that we'll communicate about what we're doing.
So we're working on the overall production pipeline to make sure that we're able to ship these changes to operators and these tweaks much faster as opposed to Ella for 6 months.
Yes.
Fantastic. Is there anything that you want to talk to us about?
Absolutely.
The future of the meta for Rainbow Six?
Absolutely. So tomorrow, something will be announced that will change entirely the way we work on the balancing of the game, and will probably change the entire meta of this game and the entire way that the Pro League players, for instance, are thinking about the strategies, and will give a lot more tool to the players to control the meta of the game. Tomorrow, we will announce a pick and ban system. So you definitely want to tune in tomorrow if you want some information on that, because I think it will change pretty much everything on Rainbow Six high-level strategy.
It's going to have a huge impact on your team as well.
Definitely will.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all for joining me. So as you heard just now, we're going to be revealing the pick and ban system during the Year 3 panel tomorrow morning. So you're definitely going to tune in then. We've got 2 semifinal matches coming up after this. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for joining us.